Hi, this is Olawale, and I want to speak briefly on what I've titled A Few Good Men. I appreciate the proponents of restructuring. I believe most of these are patriotic citizens who genuinely mean well, for Nigeria. The key premise of their agitation being the 1999 Constitution, number one, is military authored, and also that it is a patently flawed document. Now, some also actually outrightly claim the 1999 Constitution is not just fraudulent, it is also devoid of any modicum of legitimacy which ought to derive from the Nigerian people. Now, these arguments are sensible and I may even say convincing. However, I am unable, to agree with this position, with the position that restructuring is the silver bullet to all of our development and governance challenges. I have a number of issues against this proposition. Chief of this being that, assuming by some miracle that restructuring happens as Nigeria is presently constituted, what would have done is to have created personal fiefdoms, for regional strongmen and ethnic warlords. Period. That's my strong, belief. I am convinced beyond all arguments that the single biggest factor against Nigeria's development and progress is a mortal deficiency in qualitative leadership. I've said this over and over again, but it bears repeating. Now, and to this national developmental misfortune, that is a lack of a mortal deficiency in qualitative leadership, my proposition or remedy is to pose a single existential question, which is, can we find a few good men? Can we find across the length and the breadth of this blessed, this beautiful and blessed country called Nigeria, can we find a handful of good men? Can we? Nations from the dawn of human history until now have been built by a group of men, same for organizations, institutions, or corporations. Indeed, in fact, all the most advanced all the most advanced technological inventions that both dazzle and startle are the products of the mental exertions of men. A man or individual may be the incubation or driver, but ultimately he will require the support and assistance and collaboration of other men. Nothing just happens. Nothing, absolutely nothing just happens. And I still state boldly here, laws do not build great nations. Technology in and of itself don't build great nations. Robust economy doesn't build great nations. Efficient military capabilities don't build great nations. In fact, religious precepts do not build great nations. This seeming simple statements forms the cornerstone of the social psychology in the developmental framework or governance architecture of great and successful nations. That one man is able to find and influence a handful of others to believe in a just cause, a noble purpose, and a higher calling, that they can organize, administer, and manage their collective affairs in such a manner that is beneficial to all, regardless of any other considerations. I don't merely speak without proof or examples. Indeed, these are innumerable. And I start. Jesus Christ is the Son of God, yet he needed 12 disciples. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon his soul, likewise needed the Caliphs. The 7 founding fathers of America likewise envisioned a great nation built on the noble virtues of justice, fairness, and equality. Lee Kuan Yew, Singaporean returning from Britain, educated attorney, British educated attorney, led a handful of men to build a modern rainbow nation that is currently the pride and envy of the rest of the world. And time wouldn't permit me to mention China or Rwanda or the United Arab Emirates and so on and so forth. So, can Nigeria find a few good men? a few good men who don't succumb to divisive and retrogressive sentiments? Can we? Can Nigeria find a handful of good men in the military who will say no to sabotage for ethno-religious and pecuniary reasons in the war against terrorism, banditry, and insurgency? Can Nigeria find a few good men in a judicial system who will say no to pecuniary inducements but render justice as it ought to be? Can we find a few good men in INEC, that is the Independent National Electoral Commission, who will not bow to pressure to write fictional polling results but adhere strictly to the expressed will of the people? Can we find a few good men in the National Assembly, who refuse to be chorus and backup men to a sinister and ungodly orchestra intent on desecrating the noble ethos of democracy? Can we find, one good man as president and a few good men as governors, ministers, commissioners, directors generals, etc., etc., who would refuse to divert government allocations intended for the provisions of education, healthcare, housing, roads, railways, electricity, security services, etc., for their personal use? As I conclude, I recall a fitting case study dramatized in the Hollywood blockbuster movie Amistad. Now, Amistad is a 1997 American historical drama, directed by Steven Spielberg, the legendary Steven Spielberg, and it's based on the events in 1839 aboard the Spanish slave ship Amistad, during which Spanish men or Portuguese, came to Africa and abducted Mende tribesmen and took them, to America. But aboard, en route America on the Atlantic, these Mende tribesmen, overpowered the abductors, killed them, and took over the ship. Now, when they bathed on the coast of America, they were apprehended and tried in courts. Now, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in 1841, the Supreme Court, in a landmark, unprecedented judgment, delivered verdict that these Mende tribesmen, who couldn't speak a word of English, who didn't know left from right, they didn't know anything about human rights or the Bill of Rights or or the rule of law. But the Supreme Court ruled that these men had the right to defend themselves from their abductors, and whatever they did in the course of getting liberty from their abductors was justified. And he gave these pronouncements in a landmark ruling that not only were the men be set free, but that the United States of America paid the price, foot the bill to return these men, or the number of them that wish to return to their countries, and those who wish to remain in America be allowed to stay. Now, that case formed the basis, for the eventual abrogation of slave trade in America. So, a handful of Supreme Court justices did the unthinkable, the unprecedented, and totally without reference, and in so doing began the journey to the eventual abolition of slavery in America in 1865. So, I go back to where I started. Can Nigeria find a few good men? Can Nigeria count on you listening and watching me right now? Because when the chips are down, like I told you, laws don't build great nations. Technology does not build great nations. Economy don't, military don't. It's a few good men that choose to do the right things. These are the people, and these are what build great nations. Every great endeavor of human beings from the dawn of history hitherto has been done by a few great men. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.